Thank you for coming to our wellness workshop featuring Alicia Wolf. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Tracy Bryce. I'm the Director of Marketing for Mind Plus Neurology. I organize member enrichment events like this one tonight. If you don't already know, which I believe you do, Mind Plus Neurology specializes in treating those that suffer from headache and migraine. And we're located just north of Milwaukee in Mequon, Wisconsin. And we just recently opened up our second location in Appleton in the Fox Valley. So we're pleased to be able to help more people in Wisconsin. Alicia is the talented author of the cookbooks The Dizzy Cook and the Mediterranean Migraine Diet. So tonight, Alicia will share a few of her fall favorite recipes, the apple oatmeal smoothie and the pumpkin sage pasta. And she'll reveal tips and tricks along the way. And like we mentioned, that we'll be going through this step by step. If there's any questions, feel free to just raise your hand, or if you want to type it in the chat, you can, and I can get Alicia's attention if there's any questions that come up along the way. Just let me know. So also, if you have time, check out Alicia's website. The dizzycook.com is dedicated to improving the diet and lifestyle of those who suffer from migraine. So that's it. With that introduction, you can take it from here, Alicia.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you guys here. And like Tracy said, if there's any questions that you have, feel free to stop me, pause me. I love questions along the way. I'm happy to help you with substitutions. That's really why we chose these two meals, is they're really, really easy to edit based on what your own dietary preferences is. Like anything with migraine, we are super individual people, and so what may work for one person doesn't work for the next. So I am more than happy to help with edits, clarification on anything, and then I'll be giving little tips for how to cook, during migraine attacks and stuff like that along the way to keep you safe. And for this pumpkin sage pasta, what I really like about this one is there are lots of ways to edit it to make it a more migraine-friendly meal, depending on what kind of day it is for you. And say, I have some readers who just don't like pumpkin, or they don't tolerate pumpkin well. This one actually uses canned pumpkin. So what's nice about that is you can substitute it for canned sweet potato or canned butternut squash too. So you have lots of different options there if you're not a pumpkin fan. We're going to go ahead and get started with that one, and then we'll finish with the apple oatmeal smoothie. I have a few things here that I'm going to chop. I have my water in the back. I have a big pot of boiling water in the back, and then I'm just going to add a little salt to that. So generally, occasionally I find that I get questions about, is salt a migraine trigger for people? And the answer is it depends. The only time I really see salt to be an issue for people is if they have a comorbidity with Meniere's disease. And so in that case, I tend to see people not tolerate salt well or try to work on decreasing their salt. But overall, salt can be a really helpful thing for migraine in general. I think you guys have seen maybe a big push for electrolytes recently within them. Last few months, they've become a very trendy thing to do. And especially during attack days, if you have vomiting or nausea, they can be helpful too. So we like to include salt in our cooking unless it seems to be an issue for you. Starting with salted water, in cooking school, they tell you that the salinity of your salt water should be close to what you would taste in the ocean. I don't know that I necessarily go that far with it, but I add about, a few teaspoons of salt to my pots of boiling water, and that will give your pasta a lot of flavor from the get-go. We are going to work on chopping today. So for this recipe, I'll use 2 garlic cloves and then 1 shallot. Why I like to use shallots in my cooking. So shallots can be a great substitute for onions, especially for people who are sensitive to onions. And I do find I have a lot of readers who are sensitive to onions. Shallots are actually more closely related to the garlic family. So you'll find they have a little bit of a milder flavor compared to onions, and also have a hint of garlic to them. That's why I really like to use them in cooking, because they tend to be a little more elegant on the palate, I think, than onions. Hopefully they're pretty easy for you all to find. I've been able to find them in most grocery stores, especially this time of year. They tend to be very popular. So we're just gonna peel these and all I'm doing is smashing my garlic, and this will help you to be able to remove that peel from it. It just peels right off.
Alicia, is it
Yeah.
possible to pop your camera down a touch? There you go.
I was just thinking that. Thank you. So
Welcome, Jean.
yes. Hi, welcome to our cooking class today. So I'm just gonna smash it here. Give it a good smash, and then this peels right off, as you can see, comes right off. And you can do this. I've seen some people keep them in water before, but I just like to peel them as I go, and it's a good stress reliever. One thing I will show you for how to cook with migraine, and I like to do this in all my cooking classes, how to hold your knife. So this is like basic cooking principles, but a lot of knives are made too large for our hands, right? So I like to show people how to grip their knives. Basically what you want to do is put your thumb and your pointer finger on both sides of the knife neck right here, and hold it close. And I know it seems like, oh, my fingers are so close, but really they're out of the way of your knife blade even more than they would be being back here. And back here, you don't have any control over what you're cutting. You know, my garlic is going all over the place, and this can cause injuries, especially if you're having an attack day. So what I like to do is grip up on that knife, and it gives you a lot more security as you run the blade through, you know, whatever you're chopping. There is. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not seeing what you're doing. If you could adjust your screen a little bit more even, I think. Because I'm just seeing your hand, but I'm not seeing the knife. Is that just me?
Oh, can you all see my knife?
I can't see it. So maybe if you could make your window larger, Susie.
Okay, I
I
will try
wonder
that.
if you can expand that.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
hopefully
you.
you all are able to see it. I can try to zoom in a little bit more here too. All my ingredients right here. And if you need me to hold it closer to the camera, I can do that too. So we're just chopping up the garlic, mincing it here. Another thing that you can do is just use a garlic press if that's really a lot easier for you. Or what you can also do is use, I've seen these choppers now on Amazon, and I think I need to get one myself for like these bad days, you know. But basically, all you do is put the food or the fruit or vegetable on the top of it, and it has this hold blade mechanism, and you just press down and it chops everything for you. And I just think that would be so helpful for the days that you're cooking with a migraine attack, you know? So I'm just gonna peel this shallot here, just the outer layer can come off. So this recipe calls for 2 medium shallots peeled and chopped. I am using, and this, like, shallots can vary greatly in size, so it makes it a little bit difficult to know what to choose. Usually they run about this size, so even though this one was together, I'm gonna use this one as, count this as my 2 shallots basically, and it should give us about a half a cup chopped total. So I just like to run my knife down it like this, and then go back and run it through this way, so it just chops it really easily. But holding your knife this way gives you just so much more security on it. So we have our shallots chopped, we have our garlic chopped, and we are ready to make our pumpkin sauce. And part of what's interesting about this recipe is the sauce is basically created from the pasta water, which helps to thin it. So this is something I like to do in a lot of my pasta recipes, is use the sauce for a lot of the cooking. And that, you know, that's kind of nice. It's one less thing you have to do. Sometimes I like to use broth to impart a little more flavor, but using the pasta water itself is just such an easy recipe. To start to cook these shallots and the garlic together, we are going to melt just a little bit of butter. So I'm going to take about 4 tablespoons, about a 1/4 cup of good butter. Or you can use olive oil if you want to make this dairy-free as well, or just, you know, if you're trying to eat more Mediterranean style cooking. That's a really good, olive oil is fantastic for brain health, to include in your diet too. So you could even go half and half here, which I might actually do tonight. Because I love the flavor of butter, especially in the fall, but if I'm just trying to get some of that olive oil in my diet a little bit more, what I'll do is I'll split half and half with butter and olive oil. And this is actually really great because olive oil can increase the cooking temperature of your butter, so it won't burn and brown as quickly, and you can use it on a little bit of a higher heat. So that's what's really good about combining the two together as well. As that heats up, I'm going to show you what pan I'm using. So I like to go, one thing you may want to look at, you know, when you're buying pans, or like if you have pans at home too, is a lot of non-stick pans are coated with chemicals. And one thing we have to be careful of is if we've been using a non-stick pan and we haven't been using good utensils with it to scratch it. And so I'll see this a lot, like at friends' houses and stuff like that, is their non-stick pans will be totally scratched up. And this is not great because it's like releasing chemicals into your food. So, you know, just one other thing to think about, not that that necessarily causes migraine, but just, you know, from an anti-inflammatory standpoint, it's something to be aware of. So I like to use either stainless steel pans or ones without that non-stick coating on them. So that's kind of what I'm using tonight. You'll notice some of them are called like green pans. Those can be really good to use. I don't love green pans as much because they tend to lose that nonstick aspect of them after a while. One that I'm really loving that I've had forever is I just get the Sur La Table brand of their, it's I want to say anodized non-stick pans, something like that. And that's what I'm using tonight to cook this sauce with. So just something to be aware of. We are letting that butter melt. And I'm going to move you guys over with me so you can see how I make this sauce. Let's see, do we have everything ready? Yes, this is like the easiest recipe. Okay, so just have to make sure I have everything. Let's talk a little bit while that butter and oil are heating up, as well as I'm going to put my pasta in. I just get any kind of pasta for tonight. I just have this plain shells that I got from Whole Foods, but something to be aware of if you're having this recipe and you experience migraine. Let's see how long it's for. Okay. I'm gonna throw that in there. So something to be aware of if you are cooking with migraine, and we love to eat pasta. It's like a really easy meal to make. I'm gonna set my timer really quick. Okay. But if we are just eating pasta by itself, this can cause blood sugar fluctuations because you are having a large amount of carbohydrates with perhaps nothing to balance that with. So that's why if you are going to make this recipe by itself, it does have a little bit of cheese that offers that balance to it, but some ways you can balance this for blood sugar are by using things like chickpea pasta, which has a little bit of protein to it. Or if that's not your jam, which I totally get because it does not taste the same, what you could do is add, you know, simple grilled chicken breast, even just cook a little bit of chicken in the pan before, or sear it in the pan before you make your sauce with everything. A little bit of homemade chicken sausage would be great with this, some shrimp, anything to add a little bit of protein to the meal to help balance that large amount of carbohydrates that you're getting to. And that'll help keep your blood sugar from, you know, having spikes and everything like that, which can also trigger migraine attacks. So just one more thing to think about. We have the pasta going, so I'm going to take you guys over. If you are motion sensitive, just be sure to look away really quickly as I move the camera. And then we're going to come so you guys can see what I'm doing here. Okay. Is that a good view of everything? Okay. I'm going to throw these shallots and garlic in here. And this is what I mean about like not scratching your pans, like even using just a wooden spatula, or like I will do this kind of silicone spatula for eggs so that you don't scratch your pans. It can help keep everything nice and really last you for a long time. So we're just gonna saute this for a little bit. As this garlic cooks down, we don't want it to get brown because garlic, if it's cooked too long, it can get brown and bitter. This is just enough to really release the flavors and to soften the shallot. And then to this, I am going to add my pumpkin puree. So we got 1 can of pumpkin puree. For this recipe, I say any pumpkin puree works. You just want to make sure you're not actually adding pumpkin pie filling, which can look the exact same as pumpkin puree, but it has a lot of like cinnamon and spices in it that we do not want to get in the savory pasta because that would taste super weird. So we're just gonna mix in this pumpkin. And like I said earlier, you could definitely do this with butternut squash, or you could do it with a sweet potato. That would be wonderful with this recipe as well. So we're stirring this together. And then to this, we're going to add the pasta water to thin it out and make it into a really creamy sauce. Since I have this going, I'm just waiting on my pasta, which should be another 4 minutes. So do you guys have any questions that you'd like to go through while you have me here? I mean, we might as well talk about it while we're waiting. Or anyone have anything to share? Not today? Okay.
I'll share just as like a total newbie to the kitchen, other than watching my husband. I've just been enjoying all the information you're sharing, and it's reminding me, like onions, like different things for migraineurs. And so
Yeah.
thank you, because I'm like, okay, this is a whole new, just, I'm excited to just play in the kitchen.
You know, things to be aware of, like, you know, I turned out to not have a sensitivity to onions, but I still just prefer the flavor of shallots in a lot of my cooking. So I'll use onions for things like fajitas, or when I feel like that flavor is really integral. But for sauces and stuff like that, I just think shallots are so good. And overall, I find people really tolerate them very well compared to onions. So onions can get kind of interesting. Like I've seen some people be able to do cooked onions, but they can't do raw onions. I've seen some people be able to do onions if they are like, you know, cooked down like a French onion soup versus like even just cooked into a sauce. So it's really fascinating to me to hear about everyone's personal triggers, but like I said, it's always good to explore and see what works best for you and not just like eliminate based on someone else's personal triggers. And that'll, you know, really kind of keep a lot of foods open for you, but just to, you know, be aware of certain things. Like sometimes I find it's one or two little things for people, and once they eliminate those things, then they start feeling a lot better. So I've seen both sides, you know. And for the pasta, so I used to not recommend it, but recently they've changed the ingredients, and Banza actually has good chickpea pasta with a good amount of protein in it too. So if you are a vegetarian and you don't want to add like any additional meat for protein or something like that, that's a good brand to buy. And I find you can get it at like Target and a lot of different grocery stores too. Oh, I guess we could talk a little bit about olive oil too and butter. So olive oil, I am using a kind from, when I go to look at my olive oil, I try to find ones that are 100% from a certain country. So either 100% from Greece, 100% from Italy. You want to make sure that it's not blended with other oils, and it's kind of interesting how that works because it can be a little sneaky on the label like that. Trader Joe's has some really good ones that are strictly from certain areas. Like I really like their Spanish olive oil. They have a good organic Spanish 100% olive oil. Even Costco has some that are like 100% Italian olive oils that are really good. They should be packaged in like a dark bottle. And then also another brand I like is California Olive Ranch. They always have really good quality olive oil, and they're pretty widely found. For the butter, I like to look at several different brands. Kerrygold is usually one I recommend. That's widely found. And I actually just did a class yesterday for Migraine Ireland, and they loved the Kerrygold recommendation because apparently that's like their big deal over there is the Kerrygold butter. But you also have to read the ingredient labels on butter because a lot of times you'll see like natural flavor added to them, and that's not what we want in our butter. You know, we just want it to be like the cream, essentially for the ingredient label. My pasta is actually ready. So what we're gonna do is add a little bit, make sure I'm still doing this right. We're gonna make sure we add a little bit of okay, yes, I am. One time I did a cooking class and I completely forgot like an entire step, and it was so embarrassing. And but everyone caught it, and then we moved on together. So I'm gonna point you guys down again and show you the sauce. So I turn the heat down a little bit on the, let me see. Okay, so I'm just gonna take a little bit of a ladle and put in this pasta water sauce. I do it usually about like a 1/4 cup at a time. And then I'm gonna drain the pasta and bring it over. But you can kind of see, so to this, you could add different types of cheese. You can completely leave it dairy-free if you'd like. I really like to add a little goat cheese to this. It gives it kind of that tangy flavor that pairs really well with these types of, with pumpkin, butternut squash, and those types of squash. But let's see, we're adding about 2 ounces of cheese. You could also do, I have a lot of people who feel very strongly about goat cheese and they hate goat cheese. So to that I say, you know, you could also add cream cheese, or another one that might work well for this recipe is like some Boursin herb cheese would be really good in this. And you can just, anything that melts really well, even ricotta, like a good ricotta cheese would be very good in this too. So I'm just gonna kind of mix this together until it's smooth. And then we are going to take, I'm gonna drain my pasta and move it over here. And to this, we're just gonna add a lot of fresh herbs. So things like fresh chives, fresh sage, work really well with these flavors. You could add rosemary if that's something you really like. Just kind of play with it and make it your own. But the suggestions in the recipe are for sage and for chives. And I'm just gonna,
Alicia,
yeah.
so we're seeing about half of your skillet here. I don't know if you wanted to pop it over just a touch.
Okay. Kind of. There we go.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. Better?
Much better.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So I just added the pasta here and we're just gonna mix it together like this. And you see it kind of turns into like a healthier mac and cheese. Like super creamy, really delicious. The canned makes it so much easier because you don't have to roast anything or puree anything. It's like really good for a migraine day. To this, we will season it with a little bit of salt and pepper. And it looks just like the, what is it, like the Kraft mac and cheese from like my childhood. My mom didn't usually let me eat the Kraft mac and cheese, so I had to go to friends' houses to get it. But I'm just gonna add a few, chop a few fresh chives here without moving you guys all around. And then sprinkle that in there. And chives are another thing, another herb that have like a mild onion flavor, but without adding onion to the dish. So if you're sensitive to onion, chives are a great replacement. Even if you're sensitive to things like shallots and garlic, I find a lot of people can eat chives still. So that's one herb that I really, really love to cook with. That's migraine friendly. And I'm just chopping up a little bit of fresh sage too to this. And we're just gonna add it here. And then mix that in and you're good to go. That's it. Very easy. So we made this in less than 30 minutes with me chatting away. So really this could probably take you about 15 if you're super focused. And you got dinner ready. Is that good?
It looks great.
I'm gonna set this aside and move you all over so we can talk about the smoothie, if that would be okay. But does anyone have any more questions about the pasta? We good?
Did you use a fresh sage or did you have it already dried, or does it matter?
So you can use fresh. It doesn't matter. You can use fresh. I have a little cup right here. Actually, this reminds me of a great trick that I'll show you guys how to do next. But you can use fresh or dried. I love to do like freeze dried herbs too. The brand that I really like is called, here, Ellie move. What's her name? Lighthouse. Yeah, they have them at Walmart actually. They're a really good brand. And they have, it's like real herbs. They're not, you can tell they were like just dried really fresh. And I like to use those as a replacement instead of like the other types of herbs, but for fresh. But generally, a good rule to note is that for every amount of fresh herbs that a recipe calls for, you would use half the amount of dried herbs. So that would be like a pretty good substitution to go by if you're substituting with like fresh or dried. The trick I was going to tell you about herbs. So a lot of times how I will keep my herbs fresh in the fridge is I will put them into a cup of water like this and then stick them on the door of the fridge. And it will work extremely well for keeping them fresh for like weeks. I have a parsley that's been in there for like a month. And it still looks great. So that's something that I like to do with my herbs. The only herb that it doesn't seem to work for is well, dill. I don't get great results with it. And then but basil is very sensitive to cool. So that can kind of be a little tricky with basil. Usually what I'll do with that one is just wrap it in a paper towel and stick it in the fridge that way. Sometimes that helps. Or I'll just leave it out on the counter, and that seems to work out really well too. Yeah. Oh, forgot pumpkin seeds. So we will, when I go to serve this, I will just top it with a few toasted pumpkin seeds. They're also called pepitas. They're just these like small little seeds, shelled pumpkin seeds basically here. And you can buy these I buy them pre-roasted to make my life easier. But if you wanted to roast them yourself, all you do is do it in a dry, clean pan over like low heat. And that will probably for about like 5 minutes, very, very slow, keep mixing it. Otherwise they will burn. But that'll help you toast them. You could also do it in the oven about like, 300 degrees for maybe like 10 minutes or so. Just keep an eye on it, keep mixing them up, and that'll toast them up really nicely too. You don't have to do this either. It just adds like a little nice crunch to the top of the pasta too. So I like to wait to serve I'm gonna serve those to keep them crunchy and fresh, because if you mix it in with the pasta, they can get a little bit like soggy and not as crisp. So that's why I like to wait till you're about to serve to add those. Is there anything else? No? Okay. All right, let's move on to the smoothie. I am just going to, let me see. I'm gonna flip this over because I don't want my smoothie to taste all oniony and garlicky. So let's do that.
I got a quick question. I walked away and I missed what kind of nuts, roasted nuts, did you garnish it with?
I like to do like roasted pepitas. So little pumpkin seeds.
Yeah.
You can buy these. They have them at Trader Joe's. I've seen most grocery stores. I get these in the bulk section at my grocery store here.
Perfect.
They're really good. And pumpkin seeds are actually really great for your brain too. They have a lot of healthy fats to them too. So if you're someone sensitive to nuts like myself, I discovered that on a migraine elimination diet that I was really sensitive to certain nuts. I used a ton of seeds in my cooking and for snacks, and they're really great. They're some of my favorites. Yeah, and this will store for, I would say, about 3 days in the fridge. If you don't add protein to it, I would do it the full 3 days. If you're going to add some sort of protein to it, like chicken, I might max it at 2, especially if you're like tyramine sensitive, because that can kind of build up over time. But just something to be aware of. I also don't know that this would freeze great. I don't think I've frozen it before, but you could freeze it and then just try to microwave it in intervals, like stirring pretty well. What I would do is save more of the pasta water or have some broth on hand to kind of mix that in to make sure it's like saucy and not super watery. If it does turn out to be watery, you could also mix in more cheese with it, help it like kind of thicken up a little bit. And then, you know, place it over like medium heat on the stove and let it kind of simmer down a little bit to release some of that moisture too, and that might help as well. But yeah, this should last you for a day or 2 in the fridge as well. Let's talk a little bit about the apple oatmeal smoothie. So with smoothies, you have the same thing that you want to be aware of as doing pasta, which is the blood sugar spikes that we want to try to avoid when we have a migraine disorder. So a lot of the big mistake that I see people when making smoothies is they use a lot of fruit and a lot of carbs, and they're not balancing it with any protein or fats or fiber to kind of slow that absorption of the fruits. And so their blood sugar spikes, and then they feel awful after they drink a smoothie. And so that's something that we want to try to avoid with it. I do love smoothies, like for migraine in general, because if there's one thing that I'm making, or if there's like one thing that I want to make when I don't feel well or I feel really sick with migraine, it's a smoothie. Just because it's like so easy. It's a really good way to get in a lot of nutrients fast. And so I'll kind of teach you today how to build a good smoothie with a little extra protein. We'll talk about ways to edit it too. But this smoothie is a good base, like as is for just fall flavors, and it also has like a lot of fiber and prebiotics too with the fresh apple that we're using. So I'll show you how to use it. I have 2 different blenders. So today I'm going to use a NutriBullet blender. And then I also have a Vitamix blender, which is like my fancy blender. So with Black Friday coming up, I would recommend, if you don't have a good blender that you love that still leaves things chunky, that may be a good investment for Christmas and the upcoming holidays. And it will just make your life a lot easier if you're trying to decide between the 2. So between the NutriBullet and things like, here, let me go get my Vitamix really quick so I can show you. So what's cool about the Vitamix is they have a in-house like repair team, and so if it breaks anytime soon, you can send it in and they will repair it for you. So you really do get what you pay for with it. I've had this since I've been married, before I was married, so like about 8 years, and I'm like running it into the ground with recipe testing. So I just bought one on Amazon Prime Day to have too. But I like this one if you're going to make a lot of soups that you want to blend and you don't have an immersion blender, which can blend the soup right in the pot for you. I recommend this, or if you're making smoothies for a lot of people, anything that you're making for a large amount. If it's just you, I would recommend this NutriBullet. It's just really easy to use. You can drink it right out of the cup. Yeah, so those are the difference between the 2. Today, since I'm just making this small batch of the smoothie, I'm going to use the NutriBullet. And we are going to start with 1 cup of roughly chopped apples. So I have a Honeycrisp apple here, which is like my favorite apple. I saw this this meme on Instagram the other day. I'm getting a new knife. But I saw this meme on Instagram the other day that was about all the how the people who eat Honeycrisp apples are like looking down on all the peasants who eat like the Fuji apples and stuff like that, and it made me laugh. But really, Honeycrisp, they're a little more expensive, but they're so delicious, and I really like them. I also like to keep the skin on the apple because it's a good source of prebiotic fiber too. So just make sure you wash it really well. I'm just kind of going to rough top these. If you want to, what would be a great idea to make the smoothie super thick is to just rough top it like this. And then to add this, you could add these apples to a sheet pan and stick that in the freezer, and that will help freeze these up so that they're nice and they give you like a better, thicker texture really to the smoothie. But you know, sometimes you're just like, oh, I want an apple smoothie, and you don't have apples already frozen. So that's essentially how we're going about it today. So I have roughly 1 cup of chopped apples. So I'm just going to chop the rest of this apple really quick. But this would work if you can't find Honeycrisp. This would also work with Fuji, Gala. The only apple I wouldn't do is probably a Granny Smith. Wouldn't taste ideal in this, but there are places to use Granny Smith apples in smoothies. Especially for a really tart flavor. Like where I would probably use one is I have an anti-inflammatory smoothie on my website that's extremely popular. And especially like for migraine attack days, a lot of people swear by it for being able to kind of bring down their pain or ease nausea or just a number of different things. And so that would work. It normally uses pear, but you could probably substitute with a Granny Smith apple, and it would work out really well. To this, so normally I recommend people add dried mulberries. I don't have any on me right now, but I do really like them for smoothies, and this is because they add a lot of sweetness that is similar to a banana, so they have that kind of like butterscotch flavor. You can find them at a lot of different health stores. Whole Foods has them. You can find them online on Amazon. And all you need is about a tablespoon, and they add a lot of sweetness to your smoothie that you would miss with bananas. So a lot of people tend to find banana to be triggering, especially super ripe bananas. And so this is a great substitute for it. Obviously, it's kind of one of those like odd ingredients, so you don't have to use it in this recipe, but you know, it's something I would recommend. To this, we're also going to add about 3 tablespoons of rolled oats. And this will also add a little bit of fiber as well as just help us to thicken the smoothie too. Okay. And then something that I love is sunflower seed butter. And so, my son loves it as well, and he's like cleaning out my sun butter stash. But I have 2 different types. I tend to like the one with no sugar added, but if you're having it like on toast or whatever, the sugar, this one has like a little bit of sugar to it. Don't necessarily think I need that in the smoothie, but if you're doing it for toast or alone, like that's what I would recommend. So to this, we're gonna add a tablespoon of sunflower seed butter. And I'm cleaning this out because we go through it like nobody's business. And again, this is just like if you're sensitive to nuts, you could also, if you're not sensitive to nuts or not doing like a migraine elimination diet, then you could definitely use almond butter or even cashew butter would be really good in this smoothie as well. And this adds a little bit of fat to the smoothie to help kind of balance everything out. The other thing I will add to it or talk about is protein powder. And we'll add this after all our spices and everything else. To this, we're going to add about a 1/4 teaspoon of the nutmeg. Adding that. And that'll give it kind of like an apple pie spice flavor. And then we're also going to add 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. There we go. Okay, and cinnamon has actually been studied recently. I think it was in 2021. They did a study on cinnamon. We always hear about ginger, but there was a study done on cinnamon and actually being really good for helping with pain and bringing down pain, as well as like being potentially used as a preventative supplement in the future. So it doesn't get a lot of attention, but I thought it was a really interesting study, especially like from an anti-inflammatory perspective, and just like thinking about adding cinnamon in more spots too, instead of just like giving ginger all the attention like we usually do with migraine. And to this, I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider. So about a 1/4 cup of apple cider. And this is just a local apple cider that I get. It's like fresh pressed, and I really like that. But you could, you know, the bottled stuff that you can just find with other juices is fine. That works too. And then we're going to add a little bit of milk to this as well. So the milk adds a little bit of creaminess. We're going to add about a cup of milk. I am using coconut milk here, but normally what I would like to use is I really like to either use flaxseed milk or hemp seed milk in this, which would be really great for brain health. I don't love to use oat milk with this because we're already using oats, and everything else has a lot of sugar content here already. So I like to balance it with something a little more stabilizing, like the coconut, the hemp milk, or the flaxseed milk, or just regular milk too. That works as well. We always forget about regular milk with all these fancy milks. And then finally, I'm gonna let me show you this really quick. So one of my favorite protein powders is this Sprouted Living. It's this pumpkin seed protein powder. Especially, I find that like I am incredibly sensitive to protein powders. And a lot of them actually are very high in glutamate. So if you are someone who's sensitive to MSG, that is something to watch out for when you're having protein powder. And I can't even tell you how many people I've brought this up to, and they were dizzy or having symptoms every single morning. And then once they changed their protein powders or eliminated it, they started having better results with that. So it's definitely something to be aware of. You know, a lot of times I used to think like collagen protein was like so good for you, and you look at the ingredients and it seems like very clean. But if you look on the back, you can see how much glutamic acid it actually has in it that's like naturally occurring with the processing of the protein powders. And this is a big case for things like pea protein as well. So pumpkin seed protein, this company also makes a sunflower seed protein too. There's a company that makes hemp seed protein, which is a great one to look into. Rice protein, egg white protein is another one that I've looked at too. So these are just different types of protein powders that may be better tolerated. And you'll just kind of have to experiment and see what works best for you. I used to do the hemp seed one, but I found the flavor wasn't quite as forgiving as this pumpkin seed protein. It can get a little bit chalky in texture. So I will either just cut the amount in half. So either just use 1 scoop to it, or I will try to fill it with other things. Other ways to get more protein in your smoothie besides protein powders. One that I really love is cottage cheese. So when cottage cheese is blended in your smoothie, you will just taste this like creaminess to it, but it won't have like the chunkiness of cottage cheese. I know a lot of us hate that texture. So when it's blended in smoothies, I find it's really, really delightful, and it makes a great yogurt sub as well. The thing about it is it does have a little more salt to it and a little more sodium, so that can change the flavor of your smoothies, but sometimes that's in a really good way. I find, even in here with like the sweetness of the apples and the flavors that we're using with the cinnamon and everything like that, adding a little bit of the sodium to it would actually, work really well, almost like a caramel apple type thing. And it would add a little bit of creaminess too. So if you didn't want to do this with milk, you could do it with water, add water for your liquid instead, and use like a tablespoon or 2 of cottage cheese, and that would also add a little bit of protein to your smoothie to balance it out too. So we have everything here. Usually what I like to do, like if I were making this in my Vitamix, what I would do is blend this as is and then add ice to it. I'm sorry, I need a little bit of water. Just chatting away. Since I am using the NutriBullet, I'm going to add a little bit of ice to this automatically. I'm looking at about a 1/2 cup of ice, just to give it a little bit of texture to it. And then we're gonna plug this in down here. Sorry, I have everything tiled, all my plugs and everything child locked and stuff. I'm gonna turn off my mic really quick so the noise doesn't get to anyone. All right, here we go. Here we have this apple cinnamon oatmeal smoothie. Oh my gosh, really good. Really good. Tastes like fall in a cup. Are there any questions? I hope you guys found this very helpful today. Especially like all the extra tips, about things like protein powder, sunflower seed butter, how to chop, everything like that. And if there's anything else that you need that you can think of, or you have questions on how to edit recipes, how to make them migraine friendly, like don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help with all that stuff. Both these recipes are on my website. The pumpkin sage pasta is actually in my Dizzy cookbook. So if you have that, that's a great place to find it too, where you don't have to look at a screen. And yeah, let me know if there's anything else I can do for you.
We have a half an hour left in our meeting today. So now that we're done with the cooking part, I mean, maybe we could just transition into more of a just general Q&A, or maybe you want to talk a little bit more about your story and how you became the dizzy cook. Maybe go down that path for a little bit and see if it spurs on any other questions. Anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and I can ask Alicia, or if you want to just go ahead and ask away. So, but I'll hand it over to you, Alicia.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, if anyone has any questions about the cooking stuff, feel free to ask. A little bit about my story, if you don't know me. So about 7 years, I was diagnosed with chronic vestibular migraine. I have a background in cooking. I've always loved to cook. Originally self-taught, and then I've gone to cooking school here in Dallas, as well as I've done a culinary immersion program in Burgundy in France. And what was kind of interesting to me was I've tried to take cooking classes too, like wherever we've traveled. So places like Thailand, we've done some in Italy, and I just try to learn like from different cultures and see what they're doing. But the one thing that really everyone's like, oh, how did you pick, going to school in Burgundy there? And the one thing that always stood out to me, not just from like wanting to learn like French techniques and being inspired by that, but also the way that in Burgundy specifically that they go about eating and having meals together was very inspiring to me. It's a little bit different. Like if you go to Paris, you always think of, these fancy restaurants with these, all these coursed meals and everything like that. And it is like that in Burgundy too. But the food there has so much soul to it, and it's very hearty, and it's usually recipes that people have been making for years and years, or that they've had in their families and that they've shared. The markets there are very small. People very, very much focus on where their food is coming from, and they like to know who they're sourcing it from. So you go to the market in Bone, and it's you have your cheese guy, and you have your meat guy, and you have the guy who gives you your strawberries. And every time, you're kind of cooking based on what's available to you, what's in season. And I found that to be very inspiring, especially from like a migraine perspective, is just like knowing what's in our food and using those simple ingredients to cook and to make very delicious meals, and how that can also affect our brain health, using these simple ingredients, and from that perspective. And so that's what I really love about everything. And so I kind of brought that back with me, and I try to incorporate that a little bit into Dizzy Cook and those recipes too. I started doing this. So I was diagnosed about 7 years ago. It was after trying to I was having moments of dizziness, vertigo, feeling movement that wasn't there. Just to name a few: light sensitivity, sound sensitivity. I mean, the list is long. As I'm sure all are familiar with. And it took me about 7 doctors to get diagnosed. I ended up having to go out to the Mayo Clinic and saw an ENT there because I had a vestibular therapist here in Dallas suspect that I had a perilimb fistula, which is a tiny crack in your eardrum. And they suggested that I might need surgery that would leave me deaf for the rest of my life. And so I went out to the Mayo Clinic. They evaluated me, and that's when they told me I had vestibular migraine. And I was in shock because I always thought migraine had to come with head pain, and migraine just meant a really bad headache. And little did I know that all these other symptoms could fall under migraine. And so that's what I really try to work on educating now. With my neurologist, once I found my neurologist who actually specializes in this, I got very lucky with him. And we started me on medication, supplements, sleep, try to reduce stress, all the basic things that they tell you. But we didn't really visit diet. And so I was looking to eventually have kids in my near future. And that's when I wanted to kind of look at alternative treatments and see what I could be adding in, because I was with the medications and the supplements and everything, I was having, you know, a significant improvement, but I was still having symptoms every single day. And I thought to myself, like, this has to get better. Like, this can't just be the pinnacle of everything, you know? And so that's when I found, I started looking into everything myself and doing a lot of research. And that's when I found like a lot of research on the keto diet for migraine, as well as it really seemed to only be a keto and then this elimination diet. There were certain elimination diets for migraine that seemed way too strict for me, that I could never do. I see people try to do it now, and I just still don't even know how they do it. But there was one called Heal Your Headache, by Dr. David Buchholz, that I felt was a little more manageable. And it also is part of what the Johns Hopkins clinic puts out too, as far as like their foods recommended for migraine. So I thought I would give it a try, and like, what's the worst that can happen? Either it just doesn't work, or, you know, it works really well for me. So I started trying to do it, and I was looking at some of the recipes. I remember I made like one of the recipes in the Heal Your Headache book, and it was terrible. Like, the food was awful. I'm like, I can't deal with this. I love food. What am I going to do? I'm just going to have to create my own recipes. And so even though I've had all this like cooking experience in the past, I really didn't have the recipe development experience. And that has kind of been something I've had to learn with time, is how to measure stuff out, because I'm used to cooking without measurements and without trying to have, you know, 3 people asking you like, oh, can you make this gluten-free? Can you make it dairy-free? And so having to learn how to develop these for other people has been a learning experience for myself, and writing them down and everything. And I learned a lot with my first cookbook, trying to do that. But it's definitely something that you learn by doing. And so as I started creating these recipes and sharing them, I realized like there was a huge need for it, because there are a lot of people who want to try these types of diets, but it just seems so overwhelming, especially when you already don't feel good. You don't feel like cooking and trying to figure out what to make. And I have such a passion for it, to meal plan and to come up with these ideas too. So I like to be able to do this for other people and share that. And if I can do that in a way that supports people for free, I'm all about that. So, so that's kind of how the Dizzy Cook was born. And initially it was just like my mom and my mother-in-law reading, and then people started sharing the recipes and really enjoying them. And it along the way, it really gave me kind of a sense of purpose. And it goes back to what I was talking about, like with the French, the Burgundy way of eating too, is like to sit down with your family and have all these like family and friends at the table, and to just sit there and eat for, you know, 2.5 hours, and enjoy your wine and have all these courses and everything, and just to really enjoy your company in the presence of great food. And I felt like that was such an important thing for migraine patients, is because often we're just thinking like, okay, what can I get in my stomach that won't cause me to be nauseous? What can I make quickly that won't increase my head pain? But we tend to forget about like the ritual of cooking, and how that can become an enjoyable, almost like mindful thing, especially for your mental health. And so transforming that into, I have to eat, I have to get this done to eat, be able to eat and eat quickly, versus to, I'm going to really like take myself through the steps of this process and make this meal that like looks really, really delicious to me. And this is something that I've been craving all week, and it's going to really necessarily like feed my soul. I know that sounds like so cheesy, but but there are meals that like that. I mean, I'm sure everyone on this call can remember certain meals with, you know, friends or loved ones or family, where you sat down and you have a very vivid memory of the way things tasted, the way the way you felt, the way the lighting was, and all those different things that mean a lot to you. Or maybe it was a grandmother's recipe that's been passed down to you. And so food has such an ability to bring a lot of comfort to people in times that are really, really hard. And so that's what I really want to embody and encapsulate with like the Dizzy Cook, is not just like making this to follow a migraine diet, but truly about like the experience and the ritual of cooking and bringing back some joy into your life by doing that. So I hope that translates, with you guys, and that it gives you something to think about too going forward, and how to, make that an enjoyable experience, in the future. I can't think of, let me think of what else. Oh, I guess I could talk a little bit more about, with the success of the migraine diet. So it was about like 4 months into everything that I started really having, like actually seeing results with it. And then about like 7 to 8 months where I started noticing that I was having dizzy-free days and my symptoms were really, really going aside. So, of course, I wasn't just doing the diet. I was combining this with my other treatments, which I know Mind Plus is really big on doing, like the holistic treatment plan. But I think that sometimes we just have to give any treatment a little bit of time to work. And that was the case for me too, was to, let things kind of simmer down a little bit, allow my brain that time and space to calm down, and really focusing on healing from other ways, like things that made me happy, gentle movement, going for walks, like the cooking aspect where I would plan in meals that I would get excited about, and that sort of thing too. And just with time, it seemed to eventually get better. And now I even notice, like, I always go back to these recipes and this way of cooking. If I start to have my symptoms creep in again, like especially postpartum and things like that, I'll like to prep a lot of things to have in the freezer, because I just noticed that cooking more at home makes me feel better in general. So I know it's the easy thing to do when we have migraine, to order out or to get takeout. And there are certainly nights for that too. But I do notice, like, when I make more of an effort to cook at home or have those even freezer meals planned, it makes a big difference for my head. So yeah, is there anything else I can share with you guys that you can think of?
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. That was really lovely to get all of that background. I did have a cooking related question.
Okay.
So you were talking about prebiotics with the apple skins. So
Yeah.
I've heard of probiotics. What is the difference between probiotics and prebiotics?
They basically work together for gut health. So you need both to support a healthy gut. A lot of prebiotics come from things that are like higher fiber foods. So things like apples and some leafy greens and stuff like that. Even flaxseed is a good source of prebiotics too. And flaxseed can actually be great for brain health as well. It's high in omega-3s. So something to think about including into your smoothies too. The only thing about it is flaxseed does change the texture of a smoothie. It can make things very gelatinous. So if you're not consuming it right away, like, that's something to be aware of.
I have some milled flaxseed because
Yeah.
because I had used it in a few recipes when it was just the normal seeds, and I feel like they get stuck in your teeth, like I just didn't love that. And when I saw that I had a milled, it's almost like a
Yeah.
powder. So
Yeah.
it works great.
It does. It works really good, especially like you could use the regular flaxseed if you had like a really high speed blender like the Vitamix, but other blenders like don't seem to touch it. So yeah. That's like those chia seeds too. Those
Yes.
too. Yeah. That's another really good one for prebiotics and also uh, for omega-3s too. So we use a lot of those in the new cookbook, the Mediterranean Migraine Diet Cookbook. That's a good one to add for brain health too. Yeah, I can't think of anything else to share with you guys today.
I know you were talking about your new cookbook, the Mediterranean Migraine Diet,
Yes, uh-huh.
and how you came about writing that with your neurologist. Is that right?
Yeah, so my neurologist approached me. You know, we had been working together on my treatment plan for about 5 years. It must have been 5 years, yeah. And he said he had always wanted to write a book about the Mediterranean diet for brain health and especially for migraine. Because he wanted to come at it from a very like science-based point of view, and a lot of the migraine diets out there, even like things like Heal Your Headache or the elimination diet, as much as I like fully believe that they work and I've seen them work amazingly for people, um, some people have a some people in the medical community don't like to give them respect because they don't have scientific backing behind them. And to which I say that it is extremely difficult to do this for an elimination diet because everyone's triggers are so personal. And to get people into a scientific study where everything is well controlled, you would have to get people with all the same triggers. So in order to say, yeah, chocolate is an actual food trigger, that would mean everyone enrolled in the study would actually have to be sensitive to chocolate. And like, I'm not personally sensitive to chocolate. My personal triggers are things like yogurt and certain nuts and caffeine. So I would do great in that kind of study looking at those. But then, you know, someone else who wouldn't be sensitive to them would come in and they wouldn't have that as a food trigger, and so the study would show like, oh, this isn't a valid food trigger for, you know, this selection of people. So I think that's what makes it extremely difficult to test an elimination diet, because you would need people who are all the same. And so that's my response to when usually people bring that up. But a lot of the medical community, you know, they like to have the scientific evidence, which I understand. So Dr. Bay really wanted to do a book that was scientific evidence based when it looked at food and food triggers and that sort of thing. So what he does is go through like the most commonly talked about migraine triggers, things like caffeine, chocolate, you know, red wine, aged cheese, and even things like tomatoes, which can occasionally be a trigger for some people, and why those things would be a trigger from like a scientific point of view. And then even like the tomatoes from, you know, both from, so tomatoes, like how we kind of talked about glutamate in the protein powders. Tomatoes are high, like naturally high in glutamate. So you are looking at things, it's the same thing with mushrooms too. And so that's where I find like some people will be sensitive to even natural glutamate things, along with like MSG, they're incredibly sensitive to. But they will, from that perspective, there are certain even ways to cut a tomato to decrease the glutamate content. So they've done studies on this actually, which was very fascinating to me. And we look at like certain olives and how olives are processed and brined and that sort of thing, and how some olives can have a less of an aging, brining, curing process to them than other olives. So we really did like a deep dive into like why certain things are triggers, what can be done to include them, like what you may want to look for. It's, you know, I have some patients who find eggs to be a trigger, and I hear it more and more these days. And I actually, one of the biggest things that seems to work well for them is to switch to soy-free eggs. And so these are things that we never think about, but these people may be incredibly sensitive to soy, and they're getting that through the feed and the chickens that they're using. And a lot of them, a lot of the eggs that we'll buy at the grocery store, they don't, you know, label that they, you know, fed their chickens soy or anything like that. And so these will be very clearly labeled soy-free chickens. And I actually discovered this because my son, when I was trying to breastfeed him, he had some sort of protein, milk protein intolerance, and we could not figure out what it was. He was just having a really bad allergy to my milk, and I eliminated dairy, and I eliminated soy, and I eliminated all these different things. And that's kind of how I learned about soy-free eggs, was when I was like really trying to get strict on the soy, and soy is in so much stuff that we eat. And so that's when I started buying like the soy-free eggs. And then I started noticing, I started recommending it to people who found eggs to be a trigger. And I was like, hey, you know, this may just be something to look into. And I found over the years that usually like 90% of the people who can't tolerate eggs can actually do really well with the soy-free eggs. So it's just things like that that I find very fascinating. And we kind of packaged all of that stuff and put it into a book. But the Mediterranean Migraine Diet book overall just focuses on foods to incorporate for your brain health. So the things that, you know, why I think eggs are important is they're like a really good source of like lots of different vitamins and minerals. And they're an easy source of protein too. And so they can be actually a great resource, a great brain food overall. And so that's why I try to give people alternatives to try before they eliminate them, because there are lots of like different foods out there that are wonderful for your brain health. So if you can keep them in to your diet and not be sensitive to them, you know, it's a win-win situation. So that's what the book focuses on, things like dark berries that are really good for memory too, which clearly I need. But those have been studied for, you know, like Alzheimer's patients too. I know one of my favorite supplements with magnesium 3 and 8 has like a dark berry blend that they put, wild berry, blueberry, or something like that blend that they put in there too. That I think is a big game changer for that one. And things like leafy greens and stuff. So we have like different chapters labeled by what and how what they are and how they help your brain, kind of a thing. Whereas my first cookbook, the Dizzy Cook, it's more elimination diet based. So it's really about like how to make comfort foods, but that follow this migraine elimination diet. So you get two separate things. The Mediterranean diet is more how I eat now going forward. It's more of a long-term sustainable diet versus the elimination diet, which is just supposed to be temporary to help you figure out if you have any food triggers and help you, you know, start to read labels and really pay attention to what's in your food.
Yes, awesome. Thank you for that synopsis. So Bren had a question in the chat. She wanted to know about your glasses and if they were specific for light sensitivity, and did they help with your migraines? And she was also considering getting something like them. So she was wondering if you like them, or if maybe you had a specific brand of migraine glasses that you'd recommend.
Yeah, I do. So these are called Avalux. They are, the frame is the Vox, and they're in the champagne color. Avalux recently bought Axon Optics, and Axon was like one of the first migraine glasses out there. I bought them like 7 or 8 years ago when I first started having symptoms. And they had those like pink FL41 lenses. I think we've all seen like those pink lenses for migraine. Those were like the initial lenses that kind of came out. There were some studies that were done with them from the makers of them, and they showed that they had a reduction in migraine days if they used these glasses for light sensitivity. Recently, in like the last 2 years, I think, Avalux is a new brand that took some new research that came out from Harvard about green light therapy. So it was, I believe they had the doctor who did it on Migraine World Summit about 2 years ago. And he had studied this band of green light that was supposed to be soothing for migraine patients' eyes. And there is a device out there called Aloe Lamp. It's like a green light device that can be used. I didn't personally find that it helped bring down my symptoms, but I did find that it was like really nice for anxiety. I find a lot of my readers actually cook with it if they're having like a really bad attack. They like to cook with it and just as their only lights to avoid these kind of overhead things. But yes, like I am extremely light sensitive, and especially like grocery shopping tends to get to me with like the lines of stores, the aisles, and just everything visually to look at. And I used to wear FL41 lenses all the time. And then when these came out with Avalux, they sent them to me to try out. And I really like them because um, when I used to wear the FL41 lenses at my old office, I would kind of get teased that I looked like Elton John with the pink lenses, which, you know, it doesn't matter if it helps your migraine, but like no one wants to bring attention to their migraine sometimes. And that is like very much an intention type thing. The other thing, so that's what I would like about Avalux is they look darker than they are in person, but if you look up close, like they're very lightly tinted, so they don't really distort the color for me in anything I do. And so I really like that about them. They look darker once they're on and you know, in the reflection of everything. But they also allow in, not only do they block like harmful blue light, like from your computer or your phone or whatever, but they also allow in this narrow band of green light that's supposed to be soothing to your eyes. And I do find them to be incredibly effective. They are the only migraine glasses that do this on the market that I have found. There are a lot that have the FL41 lenses, so the pink tint too. So what I tell people is like everyone likes something different. So if you can find a few brands, most of them have really good return policies. Like I think Avalux is like 60 days. So just get them, try them out, and see if they help you. Give them like at least 30 days for a fair shot. If they don't help you, you can send them back. If you do, then you know, keep them, and that's great. I wear them pretty often. I got sick this past weekend, so I've had a little more dizziness than usual. So I've been really trying to be careful about keeping my trigger load low. So I've been using them more the past few days, but usually I'll just use them on the computer or like sometimes grocery shopping and stuff like that. The thing is, like, the great thing about migraine glasses, anyone you buy, is you want to wear those more than like sunglasses, because if you start wearing sunglasses, it can actually increase your light sensitivity. So that's something we don't want to do. Looking into a special pair is really helpful, and I would highly recommend joining my email list on the dizzycook.com because I am always usually doing like extra discounts for them too. So I have a discount code for these as well as Axon, but then sometimes around Black Friday, they'll give me like extra codes too. So if they do that, knock on wood, hopefully they do, those will be out through the email list.
Awesome. So how do people sign up for your email list?
If you just go to my website, it kind of like pops up on any recipe. It'll just have you fill it in. But if you do the scroll down menu and go to subscribe, you can fill in your email there too. And I have discounts on like lots of different things, different companies and stuff like that. So not just these, but like other migraine glasses companies too. So yeah, it's good thing.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Fran says very, very helpful, and she will sign up for your email list. So
Thanks, Fred.
awesome.
Actually, let me tell you, I have a post on this. If you just search migraine glasses Dizzy Cook in Google, it'll come up, and it's about like the best migraine glasses brands, and I kind of break down like all the differences between them, as well as like all the discounts that I have for them. So like that would be a great post for you to look at and just see what might be best for you.
A wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing everything that you've done today. I mean, the cooking part and thereafter. Just so awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. It was good to see
Thank
you.
you so much.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for coming.